This is the business, and y'all ain't getting nothing for free. And if you devils play broke, then I'm taking your company. You could call it reparations or restitution. Lock and load, nigga.
Hey, this is Nate from Sacramento Info Bros. So we were at the city council building the other day, and we were walking around, and we stumbled across this big stone circle across the street. It's right in front of the California EPA headquarters. In the courtyard right there, there's this big stone circle and a grove. And immediately my first impression is, this is basically a druid sacred grove. Just like Stonehenge, that type of thing. Yeah, and it's out of place. It's totally out of place. That's what makes it suspicious to me. It's right in the middle of downtown, right across the street from the Sacramento City Hall, in front of the California EPA headquarters. And it's set up just like an ancient druid temple, basically. I mean, I say temple because I generalize like that when I'm talking about anything pagan, because there's so much overlap. Over the millennia, different pagan groups influence each other. And then you go on the inside of the stone circle, there's an inscription. It's basically a poem. If you read, there's pagan poems out there. There's druid poems out there, and I would say this is in that same style, where it's all about the nature, sort of invoking the power of nature. Making the reader thoughtful of your place in nature. Are you taking care of the earth? Like inside the sequoia grove is what it is. Sequoia trees. It's got a couple of these big stone slabs, and my first guess is that they look like primitive altars. I don't even think that they're actually being used as that, but that's what it's set up as. That's what I'm saying. It's just like the ancient druid stone circles, where they have this whole complex of a grove and stone circles and stone altars, where they would do animal sacrifices, human sacrifices. And some people think for some reason that the druids didn't do human sacrifices. But you could look up, even the druids admit that there's sufficient evidence that the ancient druids, like even the druids that are around today, admit that the ancient druids did sacrifice humans. But they say it wasn't a bad thing. And if you think it's far-fetched that this is a druid temple, there are druids. If you don't know, there are neo-pagan druids all over the world, and specifically in California, and specifically in Sacramento. Some of the groups, you have the United Ancient Order of the Druids. That's a more widespread one. And then just local groups here, you have the Sacramento Grove of the Oak and the Sierra Madrone Grove. Those are a couple. You can just find those online, and there may be more that don't have websites, etc. Those groups I mentioned are at least the Sacramento Grove of the Oak and the Sierra Madrone Grove are pretty open groups. The United Ancient Order of the Druids, it's more of a secretive group. And then maybe there's other, even more secretive groups out there that I don't know about. And so why would this be, what's the relation between the Druids and the EPA, okay, the Environmental Protection Agency? Well, the Druids would be in charge of, they would be like the caretakers of the sacred groves. And so that kind of matches up with the EPA's mission. And it's just one more example of, occult symbology around the state capitol. And so I'm just posing the question of, what's going on here? Because if the people at the top of the government are into the occult, that might be a problem for the rest of us who, just want to live normal lives and aren't on power trips, and etc. So here's another pretty widespread group, the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, which are basically like different ranks within the Druidic tradition. It says, Druids love stones and stone circles. And it goes into how poetry is also a big part of the Druid tradition. It goes all the way back, before they even had writing. It was an oral tradition where they would sing songs and tell stories that way. But nowadays, we have writing, obviously, so they also tell stories in the written form as poetry. So it goes into how the Druids believe that divinity is both immanent and transcendent. So they believe in immanent internal divinity. In other words, you can basically become a divine entity, even if it's just temporarily, by channeling different gods or goddesses, or being possessed by different spirits. And they worship nature, Mother Earth, and basically the Mother Goddess and the Father God. And they even mention something called the Gaia hypothesis. Basically, the Earth is one giant living organism. And they believe in magic. So I'm reading right here. We believe that with proper training, art, discipline, and intent, human minds and hearts are fully capable of performing most of the magic and miracles they are ever likely to need. Magical and miraculous acts are done through the use of what most of us perceive as natural, some say divinely granted psychic talents. They celebrate solar and lunar cycles and other cycles, life and death and rebirth. And so, some of this stuff is not necessarily bad, but if you, kind of look objectively at who were the ancient Druids, they were an elite priest class, right? Just like you had in other cultures, in the Greco-Roman culture, in Mesoamerica, the Aztecs and the Mayans, in Africa, in all over. And that's what I'm against, is this a small elite secretive group who just assert themselves as being above everyone else. They know better. You don't know better. What they say goes. And, just that whole channeling some sort of supernatural deity thing. They claim these supernatural powers even. and psychic abilities, being able to divine different things, and obviously not everybody in the EPA is a druid or even knows what a druid is. I'm sure they go to work every day and don't realize they're walking past a sacred grove in a stone circle. And probably not even everybody at the top is a druid, but there's some sort of druidic influence on things, and maybe there's more to it than that. I don't know. I'm just, putting the question out there. Why is there all this obvious druid stuff out in front of the EPA building, the headquarters for California EPA? And the ancient druids, were the high priests, and they were, they were kind of like the shadow government. They would advise the kings and the chiefs, and kings wouldn't make decisions without consulting them first. Even though they weren't the heads of state, they were this sort of shadowy element that influenced the government. No matter what chieftain came into power, the druids would always be there as this elite priest class running things behind the scenes. So I'm asking the question, is that something like that happening today? Obviously they aren't exactly the same as ancient druids, but they at least claim, the neo-pagan druids claim, maybe not a direct link, but at least an indirect link to the ancient druids. And they're, bare minimum, they're inspired by the ancient druids, and they try to mimic the ancient, the old ways as much as they can.
Yes, these men and their hypnotized followers call this a new order. It is not new, and it is not order.